Welcome to the 100X Life podcast, where we activate people who desire to live the words of Jesus and experience the abundant life he promises. I'm your host, Rob Dayton, and I hope this podcast inspires you to put in the work of following Jesus.
Now the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, to bind up the brokenhearted and set the captives free.
Welcome to day 5 of the 100X Life 62-day challenge. If you're on the challenge, welcome. If you're not and you're just following along and you want to be encouraged on 100X Life and how to put the words of Jesus into practice, welcome. Today we're going to talk about the muscle of following Jesus. What is the muscle that's required for us to follow Jesus? It's faith. But I got to tell you, for me, like in my church experience, and you know, this could be because I'm not listening sometimes, I feel like as I grew up, I was told to have faith, but I didn't really understand what it looked like to put faith into practice. So we need to talk about this. We need to understand, if we're going to abide in the words of Jesus, if we're going to put Jesus' words into practice, we have to understand faith and how it works, because that's the muscle that follows Jesus. So the 100X Jesus process is a faith gym to retain, resist, refocus, and repeat. It's a gymnasium. It's a daily practice. And if there is really interesting, because I think about this, what if there was a gym, you know, a physical address you could go to, and then there was a machine in that gym for every word of Jesus? So in my imagination, you could get on the Don't Exalt Yourself machine, or you could do some laps around the Don't Worry track. You get the picture. Like, there would be a machine that I actually could work out on for every word of Jesus. Wouldn't that be simple? We could just go to the gym. We'd know where to go. We could schedule it in our day, and then it would be great, because then we can build the muscle of following Jesus pretty intentionally, like that, just like we would at the gym that you may or may not be going to. So we don't have that. And so in order to do that, we need to understand, where is the gym? How do I know I'm now in the gym and exercising faith and growing that muscle to follow a specific word of Jesus? And the short of it is that when resistance comes in our life, when resistance, just like in the gym, the weight is a resistance, just like on the track or running or skiing or biking, the resistance says, stop. Our bodies say, I can't do anymore. And that is resistance, that when we overcome that with our minds, we grow the muscle. So the resistance from the enemy, specifically regarding one word of Jesus, is when you have arrived at the gym. Let's talk about that. But first, what is faith? What is it really? And it's really interesting. I asked God to teach me about faith. We all have the right, according to Jeremiah 31, to be taught by God in this new covenant, directly by him. So I'm asking, like, how do I have faith? Like, how do I do that? What's the process? And I really felt like Holy Spirit started saying to me that faith is like chairs. They're like the chairs we sit in. And when I pressed for more, I got the feeling that people sit in chairs really automatically. That's how they do it. They don't they don't come and they don't circle the chair and put their hands on it and test it out. They just pull the chair out and sit. And I know, maybe you've had this experience, I certainly have, is that sometimes chairs fail to support the weight, or they give in, or something breaks and we fall to the ground. But somehow we've overcome the fact that that has happened to us, and we still automatically sit in chairs. And so I felt like Holy Spirit was saying that mature faith is to believe so convincingly in something that it has quick automatic action. We don't have to think about conscientiously about sitting in chairs. It just happens because we have faith in chairs. We've established a faith. So another question is, where does faith exist? Well, faith exists in the mind. That's where it exists, because faith is about something that hasn't happened yet. In other words, when we're coming in on a chair, we haven't sat in it yet. The faith is in our minds. That's what enables us to quickly go ahead and sit in the chair. And so it's in our minds that we have to cultivate faith. That's where it's going to exist. And what is the measurement of faith? How do we measure faith in the real world? Like, what would that look like? And so when I think about that, I think about James, the brother of Jesus. And he says in James 2:20, he talks about what it would look like to have faith. He says, "But are you willing to recognize, you foolish fellow, that faith without works is useless?" In other words, he's saying that if we don't have action from our faith that's in our mind, if we don't take action, that we actually don't have faith. It's the faith that we have in our mind. Let's just say, back to the chairs, we could go and we could circle the chair, and it would be available to us. But if we sat on the floor, I'd know immediately that you do not have faith in chairs, because you're not willing to sit in one while everyone else is sitting. And James uses this example about Abraham. And Abraham, who is told by God that he will be the father of nations, believes so strongly in this word. He must have had to cultivate this imagination that, yes, I'm going to be the father of nations. He has a son, and then he's willing to actually sacrifice his son because he believes so much that God will make him father of many nations. He's willing to actually put to death the thing that seems like the pathway for that word to come true. That is powerful, that he was willing to do that. So the goal is that faith would take unconscious, automatic action. We wouldn't have to think about it. And so faith is deciding, like we say, I'm going to believe in something, and then we go on this journey to actually indoctrinate it, to renew our minds so that we, instead of conscientiously thinking about something, we automatically do something because we believe it so strongly. It takes repeated exercise to put it in the unconscious mind and to be automatic. So this journey is all about putting Jesus's words into action. So let's talk about what it means to have faith, the muscle of faith, for Jesus's words. Well, faith in Jesus' word is the capacity to reproduce it. As we've learned, we have to reproduce a word in order for us to show that we're actually believing it, or we get 100x. We have to, he says some words people reproduce 30, 60, 100x. There's that 100x, which is his process. We get in 100x life. If we're going to be 100x, we've got to be really good at reproducing his word. That means we got to put it into action. So, for example, we can say we have faith in the word on forgiveness if every time the enemy comes, or we're wronged, someone does wrong with us, or someone lies to us, someone does something to us, if we lean into automatically forgiving and not mulling it around in our minds and kind of getting in consternation and bitterness, we just automatically let it go, then we know we are having faith in forgiveness. And then people watch that, and it gets reproduced in their own lives. So that is how it is with each word of Jesus. We're going to have to go through a faith gym to exercise that word with experiences that will, real life experiences that will help us build that muscle. Remember, you're not in control of your circumstances, but by putting into practice the words of Jesus, your response to those circumstances are going to be radically different than the world's responses. That's what makes us stand out. That's what makes us a light on a hill. So we have to get in the gym. We have to get in the gym. So If faith is a muscle that's being grown, then the 100x Jesus process of retaining the word, resisting the enemy, refocusing when we're distracted, and reproducing, that is the gym process of growing our faith in that particular word. So we have to first retain the word. We have to remember it. We have to start focusing on it. If you can build an imagination for what it would look like to put that word into practice, that is even more powerful. And then the enemy provides, because the enemy comes on account of the word that is sown in us, the enemy provides an opportunity for us to actually get in the gym. That's how it works. We actually get in the gym when the enemy comes. So remember what we are talking about at the beginning of this is that we don't know where the gym is. It would be very convenient if we could go to the gym and work out each of the words of Jesus. That would make it very orderly and we could have it in our schedule. But because we wait on life circumstances and the enemy in particular to show up with the opposite word, we have to be good at knowing that, oh my gosh, here is my gym experience to work out the word of Jesus that I just learned, that I'm working to retain. Here's my opportunity to actually flex the muscles in the gym to grow the muscle. It's really interesting how you can get a word in church to do something and you just come alive and you feel so good about it. And then all of a sudden, the contradiction of that word comes into place very shortly after that, and we get discouraged. Well, instead of discouragement, let this be your excitement, because God is growing a faith muscle in you through each of those experiences. So we want to, when we experience the resistance of the enemy in a word we're trying to believe that we're retaining, we want to kind of get excited. You know, James might even say, consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kind. So we got to get excited. We're in the gym. Okay, let's work out. Let's do this. And then when we're successful with that, the enemy employs a different strategy, the strategy of distracting us from actually doing or putting into practice that word. And that requires us to refocus. We need to be conscientiously aware of words of Jesus that we have kind of let fall to the wayside, that we have a muscle that's in place. We have muscle memory to do it, but we're distracted and focused on other things rather than exercising words of Jesus. And then finally, we get the opportunity to reproduce his word. And that's when we're automatically indulging in taking action on a word that we've worked out in the gym, we've developed a muscle, and then we unconsciously automatically just do that word. We just put it into practice. That is how we build the muscle of following Jesus. It is his 100x process of taking us into the gym in life circumstances so that we have the opportunity to become more like him by building a faith muscle to put his words into practice automatically without thinking. So I hope that is helpful to you. Let's talk about the 100x lifestyle. How would we know we're exercising the muscle of faith? What would we have to believe? What does that look like practically? Well, first, you understand that faith does not require conscious thought to act. In other words, mature faith, when it's fully mature, we don't really have to think about it. It just happens. We put it into practice. And, sometimes, depending upon the significance or the gradient of the challenge we're feeling, like for instance, someone who just, cuts us off on the road versus maybe getting cancer, like those are two different levels of testing in terms of belief. But when we get to mature faith, we might hesitate with a bigger one, but right away, we're going to automatically start living that word of Jesus. So we have to understand that mature faith does not require conscious thought. It's an unconscious thought. And then you recognize that mature faith can be developed for each of Jesus's words. Don't try not to think of faith as this broad thing that is all encompassing. Think of faith and a muscle of faith for each word of Jesus. That'll be so much easier for you to measure and to consider, am I really, really doing this? And in your book, you'll have this guide. We're going to introduce it to you in the next chapter, but there's this guide where you can rate yourself on each word of Jesus in his terms, how he would rate it. Are you just receiving this word? Are you resisting? Are you in the gym? Are you refocusing? Or are you, in fact, reproducing? We need to be able to measure and gauge where we are in Jesus's 100X process. Where are we in faith? How accomplished are we at a particular word of Jesus, so we can actually measure it? And then finally, you actively work to grow faith through the 100X Jesus process of retaining, resisting, and refocusing. In other words, you are conscientiously aware that there's a faith gym of life circumstances that is coming at you, and you are going to indulge in that. You're going to intentionally maybe even welcome it. You're going to work out. When you get distracted, you're going to think, okay, I need to refocus. Let's get back in my game. And in the process of reproducing his word, remember, we reproduce his word when the faith happens unconsciously, automatic, quick reactions, and then people they see our actions, and then that becomes the fruit that we offer them, the testimony of that experience in that word, which also contains the seeds, more words for them to put it into action. That's what it looks like to build the faith muscle of following. We will see you next time. If you believe in the 100X Life movement, please follow and invite a friend by sharing this podcast. The 100X Life movement can also be found on Instagram and Facebook, and also at 100xlife.com. The 100X Life podcast was produced by Jenna D of Jenna D Services with music by Ryan Ellis.
Lost, but you found me here, and your fire burns inside. It will not disappear, because the Spirit